Namaste. When we attempt to cultivate an appropriate seated position that we can use for both meditation and pranayama, breath work, one of the most simple adjustments that we can make and seated positions that we can learn to sit in for longer periods of time is what we refer to as Sukhasana, or cross-legged seated position. So as you can see here, I am seated up on a larger cushion, which is going to enable my pelvis to be higher or at a minimum level to my knees. The purposes of making sure that the pelvis is at an appropriate height for our seated meditation and breath work is because when the pelvis is, for instance, tucking under, to use a very simplified term, if I were to not be seated on a cushion, what that's going to do is it's going to shorten the positioning between my frontal hip points and my rib cage, so that my lower spine, my lumbar spine, is now going to be moving in the opposite direction of its natural arch. Meaning at the front of my spine, I'm going to now be in a flexed position, which is going to reduce the room of the diaphragm. One of the things that we want to try to move toward with our meditation and breathing practice is freedom of the diaphragm, meaning the movement and freedom of movement up and down naturally without strain of the diaphragm as we breathe. So raising the pelvis away from the floor, as I said, at least level with the knees, is going to enable us to move the weight of our body and our spine more toward the front of the sit bones, so that the spine is slightly leaning forward where there's no strain. So now, after long periods of seated meditation, this is going to become more and more comfortable. If you have any type of knee issues that are taking place, what you could also do is sit up against the wall, take another pillow and extend the legs out in front of you, place the pillow underneath of the knees and sit upright against the wall. But for today, just going over a little bit of the positioning of the legs in this type of seated position. As you can see, I'm crossing at the center of the shin bones, and there's a slight flexion to my ankles. Now, this is not going to be an appropriate position and meditative position for all of us. So, especially if we're going to be here for longer, another adjustment is to take the knees a little bit wider and release the flexion at the ankle, so that there's more of a lengthening action of the inner thigh to the inner knee. Now, this might be appropriate as you begin your practice, going a little bit wider and having the pelvis a little bit higher. But you can work towards this positioning of the crossing at the center of the shin bones. That's going to create this triangular type shape of the shin bone that's tucked underneath the thigh bones relative to the pelvis. So as you assume the Sukhasana seat, then we can take the hands into two different positions. We can either place the palms down onto the thighs, the knees, and just allow the elbows to relax, or we can start to interlace the fingers, let the thumbs rest into one another, and just let the palms rest in the lap. Sometimes this is a really nice place to find yourself, especially if you have that tendency maybe to fidget a little bit or to do things with the hands. It's really nice to feel the palms. That's a position that I generally like to take when I'm moving into my pranayama work or into a more of a meditative position, especially if I'm going to be 10, 15 minutes and beyond in my seated practice. But a really easy way to start some type of meditation / breathwork pranayama practice is what we refer to as using an ujjayi breath. Now, there's a little bit of a misconception about what this breath specifically is. Oftentimes we use it in conjunction with asana postures within the yoga practice, but it's also a great breath to use to create space in and around the body, meaning freedom of the abdomen and freedom of the thoracic cavity, in and around where the rib cage is, up into where the collarbones are. When we're using breath work, we're not trying to do too much. Instead, we're allowing the breath to do the work for us. So that can be sometimes a reconception of our perceptual mode of thinking, meaning that we're allowing the breath to do its own type of thinking for us rather than our usual cognitive capacities. Allowing the somatic body to take over and do the work for us in both calming the nervous system and freeing up some of the musculature that could be creating tension in the body. So I take my palms into my lap. I allow my spine to be a little bit upright. I'm stacking my skull over top of my rib cage and my rib cage over top of my pelvis. And I'm going to allow my jaw to stay soft. My teeth are not touching. And I'm taking my tongue and I'm very gently resting it against the roof of my mouth. I'm not pressing the tongue. That's going to leave room at the back of my throat to change the direction of my breath as I breathe through my nostrils. So I'm slowly going to move into that position, and then I'm going to allow my belly to fully relax. There's no tension in and around the abdomen. And then if it's helpful, you can always take a palm to the abdomen just to guide that breath. So I'm slowly going to inhale, and I let my belly expand through that specific anatomical positioning of the mouth. And as I exhale, I'm going to let my hand and my belly relax again. And that could be our starting position. I inhale, I let my belly expand. And I exhale, I let my belly, my abdomen relax. Now as you start that, you can start to lengthen out that process. The inhale becomes longer without strain. The exhale becomes longer again without strain and forcing anything. The misconception is that the Ujjayi breath is an overly active breath. We're using the breath to allow space to occur naturally in the body. So that's our starting point. We allow the inhale to grow. And we allow the exhale to move us into that space that we've created on the inhalation. And that's all we're doing with our breath work. And we're focusing the attention on that process of inhalation and exhalation. If you find yourself with the thoughts wandering away from that physical feeling of the breath, take a slightly larger breath just to allow your attention to come back to that physical feeling of the inhale, exhale. So we just sit in that breath for a while. And we might just start by doing this for 1 minute, 2 minutes. You might want to set a timer for a phone. And slowly, each day you might increase that, or week to week you might increase that practice. And you might work up to, say, 5, maybe even 10 minutes of that simple Ujjayi breathing. The jaw stays soft, breathing evenly through the nostrils. Abdomen stays relaxed. The diaphragm is both strengthening and releasing as I inhale, exhale. And I'm creating a greater relationship and integration between the 3 bowls of the body: pelvis, rib cage, and skull, and the different diaphragms of the body. Noticing if any tension is arising with the breath, or maybe a little bit more freedom is emerging, both physically and perhaps mentally in the body. And then we slowly start to release that practice, giving yourself a few minutes a day potentially in cultivating a slightly longer practice. But the most important thing is that you're allowing yourself the time and space to focus the attention and simplify the attention so there's not too many things going on around us, and we're finding a space in an environmental sense where we feel comfortable and safe doing that. Sometimes even just the parameters of the shape of the posture, Sukhasana, can allow that. I find myself a little corner, inside, outside, within nature, wherever it might be, and I just spend maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes just focusing the attention on that breath. It's a form of meditation, and it's a form of breath work, and it's simplifying and honing, attuning the attention on a simple bodily function. Pranayama, seated meditation. Namaste.